Hello, and welcome back to After the Movies, the show where we talk about movies after you've hopefully seen said movies. Let's see. So that button's working. Okay, good. We're still getting audio. Okay, and I'm supposed to be looking at the camera now. So I guess last time the camera went out of focus and just stayed out of focus for being an awesome, really expensive webcam with like a Carl Zeiss lens. It kind of failed me last time. So for those of you who are watching, I have turned off autofocus. So if it goes out of focus, I don't know what we're going to do. And then the other thing that we noticed, and was painfully clear, is that we were out of sync with our own audio, which coming from a single device, that was really confusing to me. So we're now trying it at 200 millisecond delay to see if we can get it to work better. So here we are. Hi, I'm Luke.
I'm Jonathan.
Yeah, we didn't do last names this time, and that's probably good. Anonymity on the internet. Okay, so this week we're talking about yet another film at After the Movies, which is shocking that we talk about movies at After the Movies. And this film is we're talking about what film are we talking about?
We're talking about Interstellar.
Oh right, Interstellar. We're talking about Interstellar, this movie by the really amazing Christopher Nolan. And we're talking about Interstellar, and I'm just going to put this out here right now. If you're going to be watching us with After the Movies, you might encounter some opinions that go against like the vast majority of the world. In fact, there's one film in particular, and it's not this film, but there's one film in particular that has like a 98% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it's not very good. And someday we might talk about that.
But chances are, if one of us is in that camp, the other one of us is in the other camp. So you'll get a little bit of a good vibe. You get a bit of an argument, perhaps even. But don't worry. Maybe. Sometimes we might both be diehard against the rest of the world, which is totally okay.
Yeah. You know, we're rebels that way here.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Okay, so Interstellar, what are your thoughts starting this thing out?
Interstellar. Okay. I think it was said well by my friend when we left the theater. And what he said was there were moments of just film mastery in that movie. There was just these sequences, these things that happened that were just really, really well done, really engrossing. But as a whole, I think that Interstellar is essentially a letdown. It certainly gets convoluted, and I think loses. There's a bigger theme I'll touch on later, but ultimately I think that it gets a little too heady. And then the headiness does not make sense, so then why get heady? And the emotional core gets lost a little bit, and it just falls apart, I think, especially in the third act. There are other problems, I think, with it as well, but as a whole, some really great sequences, some intriguing ideas here and there, but overall, I certainly don't really care for Interstellar all that much. How about you?
And when you're talking about these like brilliant moments of masterful cinematography, you're of course talking about like the webcam on the wing of the spaceship. That's like your favorite shot, right?
No. I mean that I went and saw an IMAX. Okay. And if you're gonna go see a Christopher Nolan movie, now he's doing this whole IMAX thing. I'm a big believer in IMAX. I would much rather have IMAX than 3D any day. Like that's just my push. If you're gonna go one of those two formats, go IMAX.
Well, 3D just okay. If you're a filmmaker out there and you're thinking 3D is a great idea, please consider this. As someone who wears glasses, because I just can't imagine sticking stuff in my eye every day. I hear it gets better, but no, I have glasses. Plus, it makes me look more intelligent or something. I don't know. Okay, so as someone who wears glasses, where are my 3D glasses? Okay, they're over there somewhere. You put those on, and then I have to sit there and push them onto my face the entire movie to try and keep everything in focus. And even then, the edges, like, they break, and it is a terrible experience. So if you're a filmmaker thinking about making a 3D movie, and first just get some glasses, and then put on the other glasses, and then try and watch the thing, and then stop making 3D movies.
As somebody who does not have glasses, I have seen 3D movies plenty of time. I mean, I went there for Avatar when it basically became a fad again.
Yep.
And it's interesting sometimes, but for the most part, the projection's never really that great. They can't get it bright enough to be very good, and it's just annoying to have glasses on, period, because they don't really fit your face half the time. And then you have to like do this thing where you're like you're doing this or this, and if you do this by chance for any reason, like if you went, huh? You're not going to see the screen anymore because it's going to be all weird now. It's just technology could get better, and even if it did, I'm still not convinced that 3D as a format, as a way to go, it really makes that much sense or is that great of a thing. It's more of a fad, I think, than a good, useful tool in the filmmaking medium. Maybe one day there'll be a movie that somehow proves to me, oh, wait, 3D is the future of filmmaking. But I have yet to see that, and I purposely avoid it. But that's 3D. Going back,
and we'll talk about that more when we talk about Hobbit someday. I don't know when that'll be, but
well, yeah,
yeah, okay.
That'll be a bash.
That'll be a thing.
Just letting you know right now.
When you see after the movies, episode whatever, Hobbit, you can be like, I can skip that. I know what they're gonna say.
Or watch it and enjoy the fact that we're gonna tear it a new one. Anyway, moving back to Interstellar. In the IMAX format. Point is, IMAX, I think, is a very interesting format. It's very enjoyable. If nothing else, I think that one of the most engrossing parts of film, besides having the bigger film ratio, is also the sound you get out of IMAX. And when you're in a movie like Interstellar, where you're in space and they got to do a lot of sound design, they're going to make things work for you that way, and you've got Hans Zimmer doing a score, it's one of those things where I was like, I'm going to go see this in IMAX. I don't think there's really any other way to see this, at least the first time. So I went and saw it, and the scenes I'm talking about are things like, I really enjoyed the sequence where they go into the wormhole. Everything from seeing them fly by Saturn to actually entering the wormhole and just going into that thing and the distortions of the space. I mean, when you really think about it and you look at it, it's not that crazy. I mean, especially from a visual effects standpoint, they basically warped some space stars. But when you're with that sound and you're in that theater and you're going through, it really does feel like a journey, like you've crossed that threshold, like, whoa, we're in like this crazy new place. When we do, but there's another problem with that sequence, which I'll get to that in a second. And then there's things like the waves. I really enjoyed the wave planet and the kind of the mystery there and the idea of time relativity. And, we're close to the black hole, so time's going to be distorted here. And they come back, the wave thing in the first place, those aren't mountains, those are waves. I mean, you could see it coming, but at the same time, it was just a fun sequence. It's just well done. And then, coming back to the other scientist in space who's apparently been waiting there for 23 years or something. He's just like, I totally thought you guys were dead or something. Like, you guys said you'd be back in like 2 years, and then 2 years came and you guys weren't here. Things like that throughout this movie were really, to me, enjoyable. I really had a lot of fun with those. And especially, I think one of my favorite sequences as far as like an action sequence in this movie or a tense sequence is the docking sequence.
That's what I was going to say. The docking sequence for me is that moment of sound and everything where you have this explosion and it rips through your ear, and then you like it's unbelievable. And then you're spinning and you're like, oh my goodness, how are they gonna dock this thing? Like that was a great sequence of just like ah! But that's because I hate spinning rides, so that was just horror for me.
I really do love that sequence. I think when you're working in a hard science fiction realm, which this movie is, I mean, at least it's trying to be as much as it can be a hard sci-fi film. It's not a fantasy. It's not Star Wars.
Right.
There's no sound in space because we're real here, and there's we're using real space technology. We're really trying to think about how these things would really happen, which is kind of funny considering where this movie is eventually going to go. But not getting there yet. That docking sequence is a great setup for that kind of a film and that kind of hard sci-fi, and it really is a tense, gripping moment where it's like, how do you get on that ship? I mean, that is survival. That is it. If you don't figure out a way to dock with this space station that's spinning, like, it's just funny that, it's a real world tension problem that you don't think about because you're not an astronaut and you don't think about those kinds of things. But if you really had those kind of issues, it's going towards the planet slowly but surely. You don't want it into the atmosphere and burn up. You don't want it to be spinning because you got to be able to find a way to deal with G-forces to get in there. So on and so forth. It's just fascinating how well that worked and was put together. Not to mention that not only was it filmed well, a nice setup for everything, a good tension moment, but it's also one of the best pieces of music probably from that score, period. Now, I don't know if you paid much attention to the score, but I went and got the score, and there was actually a hubbub from fans about it because that track from that particular sequence was not on the soundtrack at first.
What?
So Hans, having heard this and hearing the demand for it, actually was able to release it again, like released it digitally after the soundtrack had been released. So
okay, so you keep talking about the soundtrack, and for me, I love Rotten Tomatoes for like those sound bites of like what is a movie, and like someone there brilliantly noted that it sounds like Hans Zimmer fell asleep on his organ, and that's what I felt the entire for like 20 minutes, and you're like, oh my goodness, I just So for me, the soundtrack was what you bought that soundtrack.
Yeah, but I'm a Hans Zimmer junkie. Now the thing is, I'll buy the soundtrack just because I want to go through it and I want to enjoy the process and see if there's anything. There's not a ton of tracks on there that I like, but there is that one track for that docking sequence, and I would
Which
say
he
that
added later.
which he added later, and I was able to get after having purchased. But granted, you can make all it's good mood music. It has some brilliant things going on there, even if the organ at times, for sure, is overpowering.
Okay.
Yes, but I think that's part of the point too. I enjoyed that soundtrack to an extent. Not every track is great, but there are some tracks in there that are really, really effective. And Hans is just doing his thing, which, he did the horns for Inception, and he's like, organ, we'll do the organ horn mix for Interstellar.
Okay.
His reasoning behind it, just quick tidbit, his reasoning behind using an organ in the first place for a space movie was the idea that the organ back when it first came out was this incredibly technologically advanced piece of equipment for music making. And so he wanted something that was that complex in that kind of orchestral realm to match the technology complexities of space travel.
Yeah, I don't care. Like, zero cares at all. Like, that's interesting. But, like, so many films, and so, okay, watching behind the scenes for stuff and learning about how they made movies is sometimes far more fascinating than about the movie itself. So, I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Still don't care for the soundtrack at all.
Sure.
Okay.
So back to the docking sequence. I think it's got pretty much the best slices of everything you want from that movie as far as the kind of the space stuff goes. When we get to the story, which is again, your bread and butter, why you see a movie in the first place, ultimately what you're gonna stay there for, what's gonna really grip you. There's some interesting setups and there's some interesting ideas. I just think that it's ultimately a very convoluted movie. They have this entire concept that the world's dying and we need to find a way out of here. We need to find some way for survival, and essentially a wormhole pops up out of nowhere, and it's this kind of godsend, right? And we're able to get through it, and we're able to, by the end of the movie, we're going into black holes, which would kill anybody, period, when you got near it, right? We're going into them, into apparently a construct called the Tesseract, I guess is what they called it. And while you're in there, you can do paradoxical things, and that's totally okay.
Well, not only that, but at least theorized by our main character, and so therefore maybe the reason is that it's future humans sending so that and then makes sense.
And you can make it make sense. Like, it's not that it's like, oh, it's just too intelligent for you. It's when you're intelligent and you look at it, you go, that really doesn't make sense, because at the very, very least, it's a paradox. It's certainly straight up a paradox. How can Matthew McConaughey be in the Tesseract if he has to be in the Tesseract to get himself to go to the Tesseract in the first place, right? That's right. A paradox. Or even more bigger, right? How can we as humans even have survived to the point to ascend unless we've ascended to this place of being beyond time and space to then go back and fix our own problems? Because we would have died to not ascend or whatever. So it's essentially a couple paradoxes. And one of my biggest problems with that is I'm not necessarily against the idea of some of this kind of fantastical stuff showing up in this hard sci-fi movie. In fact, I'm a big believer in the fantasy elements of things. I think that science fiction is at its best when the answers to the science question or the human question are not scientific so much as they are a spiritual answer. So I'm a big fan of that. What Interstellar does is essentially, in my opinion, push a humanist agenda that I totally disagree with. And it says, hey, humans solve their own problems by leaving the solar system by our own abilities that we'll get later on. And that's some bullcrap to me. I don't buy that. I don't think it's going to happen. And even if it did, it's a paradox, so it doesn't make sense, etc., etc. Even the movie, like even time travel movies like 12 Monkeys that have this idea of a time travel fix the problem thing, they actually work within their own time travel mechanic. They say, you know what, though? We thought we were going to fix it, but in actuality, you caused the thing that you wanted to stop. And that's fascinating, because that's about the futility of science and mankind. And that makes sense. I buy into that.
Or you take a movie like Deja Vu, like brilliant film where you're doing time travel, but the loops already happened. And there, I'm okay with the paradox then, because it's already been established that the paradox is already in play.
Right.
It's when you introduce a new level of paradox that just
The other thing about deja vu is that it's the multiple pebbles in the river idea.
yes.
So it's like you've been doing this for so long that maybe one of these times you might actually just get it just big enough that you change the course of history in this one place. And that's again, it's those kind of it's kind of the character earns it, and you start to realize how much has been done before it, so it plays better. Interstellar starts off a little bit more confusing. It's got mysteries. Why are there random? That's the other thing. The mysteries are a little harder for me, I think, as a general audience to grasp because it's things like there's dust in different sections of the house, and apparently it's Morse code. And granted, I'm no scientist. I'm not a genius who loves science in that vein at all, but I don't understand why you would look at dust on the floor and suddenly see a pattern because I couldn't visually see. Like I saw marks, yes, but it didn't quite make sense to me. So it's a little bit of a harder grasp in some of these areas too. Books falling out that are apparently Morse code. What?
Right.
I didn't sense Morse code. Morse code to me is tapping, or you wait and then you tap some more. Like I don't get how the books that fell randomly and it sounded and it looked
Right.
random. And that's the thing. As a filmmaker, you can make it sound or look as random or
Yes.
as sequenced as you want it to be. So it felt very random to me. Granted, I understood what was going on. It's Morse code apparently, so apparently we're going to listen to the Morse code message, and it says "stay," which is anyway.
Yeah.
Paradoxes, problems with the
Right.
filmmaking, etc., etc.
For me, the opening of the film was a little more inaccessible too because they were building this fantastical world where it's like, oh yes, space travel never happened. We didn't do, and it was like, why? And did you catch why? Because like I I missed it. Like I'm okay with you saying, okay, this is the future and this is the world that we're going to build, but then you have to tie it in for me to be like, oh, I see that's why you built that world.
I'm not going to say I know verbatim or I know what the filmmakers were thinking, but I believe my best guess, I think the intention that I can gather was that the idea was that since the world was falling apart and they needed more farmers, they needed focus on Earth because there was no hope in space as far as people were concerned. The government was concerned. They wanted people to focus on the idea that, space travel didn't happen. Don't keep your eyes up. Keep your eyes down here where things are problems and we need more farmers and we need things to matter more here was the vibe I got. That's probably one of
Interesting.
my best guess. Otherwise, it's also kind of just I don't know, an analogy. I don't know, maybe not a metaphor, not too symbolic, but this idea of McConaughey always having this dreaming heart of wanting to go to the stars, and humanity was meant to go to the stars. We were meant to explore, and the man's pushing you down. He doesn't want you to explore. He wants you to stay on Earth, and I don't know. See again. Kind of interesting, kind of pointless at the same time.
Yes, and that's where if you're making a movie, please have it have a point. Please have it do something. And I'm not talking about you have to give me a sermon or a message or but like your story should reinforce each element. And here's where elements just did not reinforce the thing for me.
Mad Max versus Interstellar, and the one thing I'll say, besides that Mad Max is superior in every possible way, I'm going to say, is that details, right? World building details. There are things in Mad Max that might seem very random, but I would buy that they're world building. Okay,
Yes.
I buy that they're world building in a very fantastical place. Interstellar, I think, is trying to do the same thing with that same sequence. I think it's just trying to world build a little bit. But did I catch quite why that would be the case? And that's the other thing. Interstellar is in a world that's far more. It's supposed to be what 20 years down the road kind of idea. It's not supposed to be a fantastical post-apocalyptic world where everything's kind of crazily different. It's, hey, 20 years from now, the world's falling apart, and this is the way things look. And
Right.
I'm trying to get into that world and trying to understand it, but some of those things just don't play, I don't think. I don't think that they really do add to the world building very much. But you kind of gather, okay, so apparently now the government's saying that we never went anywhere ever and that was all a hoax, and kind of an interesting twist on things considering that's always the other way around. The government always says, no, we
Right.
did go. And there's always people
Right.
say, no, we didn't go. Kubrick did it. But again, does it really, really matter? Certainly not to the story. To the world
Right.
building, maybe some, but Luke was lost. He didn't get it. And I didn't care all too much. I was there. I heard what they said. I thought, okay, maybe interesting, and never came back, never cared, had to focus on other paradoxes more. So that's kind of where I was at. So things like that didn't play very well. They used here's a question. How did you feel about the interviews at the beginning that were like these actual Dust Bowl survivors who they interviewed about things like we had to put the bowls upside down so that they wouldn't get dust in the bowl. We could actually use the bowl
Oh
later.
yeah,
Things like that.
that was in there.
That was real people from who survived the Dust Bowl.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, now I'm.
And so
and then they echo that with the
very end with the
very
house
end.
where
Yeah.
it's like a museum,
Right?
And so
that was setting up that moment. You know what? Honestly, I didn't even remember those interviews from the beginning of the film. But now that you mention it, yeah, I kind of remember those. But they didn't tie at the time. Like
they
now,
felt
now I
little...
can feel now I can see what they were trying to do. But
it's a bit of there's a big space between if you want to say it's a planned payoff of sorts.
Right.
It's a big long space before that payoff comes. And I think
it like 21 years for one of those guys.
And maybe the audience if you were lost. But it's just kind of it's one of those things where I wonder if the plant and payoff, like if the plant might have been a little too hidden, a little too far behind, because it's a delicate balance. So I wonder if it's a plant payoff, it might have been a little too far behind. And if it's not, I think it's just kind of it's sort of interesting. Again, it textures the world. People talking about what it's like to actually live in that place, things that you're not, but couldn't. I guess we do see them have bowls and stuff upside down, but you don't necessarily understand why. So maybe it's a good tie-in to some degree to build the world, but at the same time, it's kind of jarring and kind of why is there an interview of this random old person that I don't have any connection to or understanding of what's going on here? But these are details here in the beginning, and I think Interstellar, I don't know, man. It's kind of conflicting to me because it had some promise, but when I think back, as I think about the beginning, I was bored in a lot of ways in the beginning. I didn't really get into much of anything. I was kind of waiting. I was like, okay, I know this is the setup, so give it some time to set things up. And it was saying, here's this signal that's driving them to go places. But like I said, those signals, those things felt very random, happenstance, and they're supposed to make more sense. Again, plants and payoffs. It's all planting this idea of, from the very beginning, it's planting the idea of the paradox that's going to happen later. But since it's a paradox and it's not a really, truly achieving moment or something that's really going to play and make sense to really make you feel like we succeeded, it's more of just a paradox. And that's the other thing. You have something?
Well, I was just going to say, maybe just thinking about deja vu at this moment, like, when you see the comeback around for you can save her on the refrigerator and things like that, like that is where you as the audience go, oh, okay, like there's this I get it now. That's so awesome. He's rearranging it because he's setting it up for then. This time, it's like, so those weird dust things that you saw, this is what he did to make them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there's no reveal for me as the audience where I feel like I get it now. It's like, oh, you had to tell me because I couldn't figure it out. Like it's almost like Hercule Poirot, who's like, by the way, if you had noticed that his shoelace was tied backwards this time, then you would have known. And you're like, what? I didn't even have a shot of his shoelace. How was I supposed to know? I felt that way here with this like big reveal where I wasn't part of it. I was on the outside, and it's like, by the way, this is what we did. Don't care because I'm not in it with you in this audience moment.
And Interstellar maybe, I think, struggles with that throughout. I mean, again, science fiction, I do enjoy quite a bit science fiction. And I also, like I've already said, I enjoy fantasy. So I really enjoy things like Star Wars, where it's a mixture of the two. I enjoy kind of a more fantastical science fiction, or a science fiction, like I've already said, that has a spiritual answer or spiritual elements, because that's the thing. Humans and human elements are better explained or better delved into, thought about, when it comes to science and spiritual things kind of melding together in ways that maybe don't even make sense, but also make sense at the same time, rather than when you're trying to be so hard sci-fi and you're trying to give a science answer to a question that I think has a spiritual answer. And so you've got these spiritual moments though too in Interstellar. It's not like it's totally devoid. I mean, it's got this idea of love, right? And it's a kind of a corny speech, but there's this whole speech about love, right? And Hathaway's like, well, who's to say that love isn't got some sort of science tangible thing to it, and that we should listen to that more than we should listen to the other science? And it's like, I kind of buy in. I'm like, well, you know what? In philosophy and mindset, I tend to agree in that mentality. I agree with that. But then the movie goes to, it tries to use that in the Tesseract to say that love like pulls him in, love is the thing that makes him figure out what to do. But it's such a weird answer, such a weird science answer to it. It's all again trying to make a science thing, and of course, I hate the humanist agenda because I totally disagree. I think it really doesn't work within itself. The idea that humans built the Tesseract for our own selves to get through, it just doesn't make sense. And I would argue that even if you had aliens, okay, if you had aliens say, well, they're beyond time and space, and they built this for us, even that makes more sense because it's an outside force that has some sort of ability. They've transcended time and space, so it kind of makes sense that aliens maybe or somebody or God or something beyond humans who are in the problem is able to come inside and create a way out of the problem. That makes sense. That might even be really good. It might even be. It might be. But that's not where this goes. Again, it favors a humanist science answer to I think are more spiritual and scientifically impossible problems.
Okay, and for me, the problem with the film is that not only does it like have this like humanistic whatever, but like it doesn't fit the theme of the movie, and it doesn't fit even like the kinds of things that Nolan does and the things that I love Nolan for, right? So half of Christopher Nolan's films I love. Like one of them is like on my top list. Like, one of my favorite movies of all time, Christopher Nolan. But then this film just doesn't do it. And so the films that work for me are these ones that ask these really heavy questions and are even really good philosophical, human, scientific, intelligent questions, but then they don't answer it. They let it sit because we don't know the answer yet. And that is what Interstellar was building towards. In fact, over and over again in this movie, it's like we can't see beyond the event horizon of a black hole. Okay, and when you study time dilation and blah, there's reasons why we just can't do it. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, well, we're going to base this completely off of science. Cool, I'm fine with that. Thematically, like, I'm going to come back for you. Don't worry. It's got all this stuff. And then it's like, okay, I have to like let go and see what happens on this black hole because I don't know and we can't know. And then he goes into the black hole and it fades to black and they should have ended the movie there.
You wanted the movie to end there.
Huh? I expected the movie to end there. I wanted the movie to end there. That's where the movie should have ended. The credits should have started rolling because we can't see beyond the event horizon. We can't see into or beyond a black hole. So then you've got all this science, you've got all this stuff building up to this about time dilation, how real this is, and blah, blah, blah. That's all cool and fine. I watched that little, I did that great course on relativity and all that too. Okay, fine. That's great. Cool. But then he magically got through it, and magically ended up just where he needed to be, so that magically they could pick him up, so that magically this magic could magic it. And don't care at all, because it's not important to your story. The story is about human sacrifice, and will humans go to the extreme, and how do you do something when you don't have any hope? And what happens that is what this movie is about. And so to end it where they did was just lame.
There's other problems in the end, too. For instance, he spends the whole movie trying to get back to his daughter. He then gets back to his daughter at the very end of the movie, spends 5 minutes with her, and pieces out to go find Anne Hathaway.
Who he just met
and apparently is in love with. Although I hear that there were earlier versions of the script that were worse in that regard. But it's just... I don't know. It's part of me doesn't even know what to say, because I don't know that I totally agree with you on that point either. The idea if you wanting it to end at him going the black hole, and it's
totally the right place to end.
Well, there's part of me that gets that, and if you maybe structure the whole movie to suggest that question of if it really is centering on the idea, if we can't know these things unless we go, and then the end is he goes and we don't get the answer, I could see that. But I don't even like that, because that's more.
That's Inception.
Well, Inception, okay.
No, we're not talking about Inception yet. We can't talk about it.
I know. I'm just saying. I think Inception has more closure than people give it.
Fair.
I think it's far more closure.
We'll
than
talk
what
about that sometime. We'll talk about this sometime.
But I think there's an end to that movie.
Yes.
But to say that was where you would on to end, I would be pissed off probably.
You'd be throwing popcorn at the screen?
I mean, not throwing popcorn because I don't buy popcorn anymore.
Of course not. It's way too expensive.
Overpriced. But I wouldn't throw anything because I don't want to lose anything more than my time I just lost in a movie that pissed me off.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I didn't feel that way completely with this movie, the way it is. I didn't like it, but it wasn't a complete and utter failure to me. It didn't anger me. It just had me there and go, huh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't really like it. Yeah, I don't know. Movie that's kind of, I didn't expect you to throw that. That's interesting.
But that's where the movie should have ended. Mm-hmm.
I think the movie should have gone with a external force approach, and that's what it should have done. And I would have been okay with I was okay with him going to the black hole and going on a journey through there. I was okay with that. It's when it became Tesseract, humanist, Deus Ex Machina bullcrap that I was like, this is some bullcrap. And I don't even, here's the other thing, I don't mind movies that might even do Deus Ex Machina if Deus Ex Machina is truly the point of that film, where it says, oh, and by the way, an external force or God fixes everything, and that's actually the point of the story. Like I would argue science.
Right.
Right? That is actually the point of that movie.
Right. That
there is a God, and he is watching out for everybody. I like that. You may not, but I like that. And there's the other thing. The whole movie's building to that. Yes. They even plant and pay off the Deus Ex Machina, right?
Right.
Because there's an author who's actually building everything to that point. So I like that. And I could have seen Interstellar going there, but it doesn't. And so if you're not going to go there, and your spiritual side is kind of dwarfed by scientific paradoxical problems, you're trying to, I don't know, the rush of the end, I could feel everything trying to manipulate. I really came out of it. When he's in the Tesseract, I'm watching, waiting, and then I see him doing stuff to get himself to go, and I'm still kind of like, is this going to go somewhere? And by the time we're getting to like, he's saying, he's vocalizing what this place is. He's saying it in dialogue. This is humans built a Tesseract for us to do things. That's not good filmmaking.
Exposition instead of visual storytelling.
And at the very end is hard to buy in. Everything in.
Let me explain to you how this movie actually worked, because clearly you guys don't get it.
Right, right. And people still didn't get it.
Yeah.
And people who did get it were mocked for not getting it because they didn't like it.
Right.
So it's anyway, and the music is really pushing you hard, and everything about that sequence. No, it's the nice happy tune. It's the one that's supposed to make you feel inspired, like everything's coming together. Why? Because they're pushing it so hard that everything is coming together. This is a nice moment, and I just didn't.
You felt manipulated?
I felt very manipulated, and I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
I really, really lost everything in those moments, and I was already up and down with things. Matt Damon, that whole Matt Damon section of the movie was okay. It's kind of funny the guy's named Man, who's the problem. Man's always gonna have a problem. I was like,
okay, and that for me was too on the nose. Like,
well, yeah, it is on the nose, but
he also didn't make sense as a character. Like, hey, I'm the bravest, I'm gonna go, but then
he kind of just talked in soliloquies, didn't he? He just kind of talked to himself about his thoughts of philosophy on things like
didn't work for me.
Like when you're trying to survive, you'll actually think about your kids because that'll make you go farther. And okay, but it's things like that just seem really forced. Interstellar, maybe that's the way I should say. Interstellar feels really forced to me in lots of places, particularly in the second half of that movie. Forced. And the amazing thing is that they actually spend a lot of time planting what they're eventually going to force. And I'm a big believer in the method of planting payoff. And if you don't know what that is, essentially it's you take an idea and you plant the idea in the beginning of the movie. So I'm trying to think of a very simple one. So it could be as simple as in Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi gives Luke a lightsaber and says, this is a lightsaber. It was your dad's weapon. That's a plant. That's going to come in useful later. They're going to use that thing a lot in that movie. And
any James Bond movie, here is a watch. Yes, or if you're looking at Mission Impossible, here's some chewing gum. Wonder if we're going to use that ever. Yes, you're totally going to use it because it's in a movie and you wouldn't take time to introduce something that you're not going to do.
Unless you're in Interstellar.
Or a bad film like
Godzilla.
Or we'll talk about other movies.
Anyway,
okay.
Point being, plants and payoffs I'm a big believer in. They're a very, very effective thing in storytelling and in movies. They're hugely useful, even if you can see them. The best are the ones you can't see, and then they come back, and it's a reveal. Like you said, like, whoa, I didn't see that, and that really makes sense. I love it. Or even if you see it a mile away, it can still be very enjoyable, still very effective.
Because you're part of the ride. You're on it. You're like, yeah, I know that drop's coming, and I'm so waiting for it.
Yeah, and it makes the audience feel good. But Interstellar, even though that's kind of the fascinating thing, even though it plants all these things, especially that last sequence, I feel like Nolan looked at the script and said, if we're going to do this, we're going to have, I don't know, you need English accents.
Yeah, you need an English accent, and I can't do it.
If we're going to do this, we're going to need to go to the very beginning of the film, and we're going to need to plant everything in that sequence very, very hard, because I don't think the audience is going to buy in without those kinds of plans. And he did. He really did. I still didn't buy. I still was gone. I still didn't like it. I still felt very forced upon. And I don't know, is that a second act issue? Is that something where the second act loses its way and makes the movie feel like it's going this way, and then suddenly it's going this way again? Or I don't really know. That's the thing. And I don't really want to spend the time to figure it out to some extent, because I didn't like it, and I don't think there's much value there. And even if I figured out what the problem is, and I could learn from that, okay, I still don't want to spend time on Interstellar. That's just where I'm at. So you get some great sequences, some things that are enjoyable. You've got an idea that a man loves his daughter and he wants to get back to her, and he'll do anything he can. And love can be a force beyond and through space and time. That's great. You didn't sell it for me at all. You made love a paradox, and I don't think love is a paradox. I think it can work beyond space and time, but you need to actually effectively show that, and they didn't. So.
Yeah. So I guess, in conclusion, Interstellar is like one of those Play-Doh presses where your Play-Doh's a little hard, and you're like, and it like is slowly, and it's forced.
Yes, I got that. That was funny.
Okay, right.
That was a beautiful metaphor.
Well, there we go. That's filmmaking right there. Visual storytelling. All right. So, and I got to click this. And thank you guys for joining us for After the Movies. We hope you've enjoyed this one and are not throwing popcorn at your screen saying, what a bunch of... Actually, no, that'd be great, because then you're having an emotional response. And that emotion...
Comment your problems. You know, we can have a dialogue. It's actually possible. We might address things if you want to bring it up with us.
Yeah, you could post comments. That'd be cool. Or subscribe, you know. Like, hey, look at that. We're like being like real YouTubers.
Real YouTubers. What?
All right. Thank you guys for joining us for After the Movies. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.